Hypertrophy Odyssey, chapter 176. It is the third day of the week, aka the Psycho Crusher workout. I'm on my way to the gym and I'm feeling great. But anyways, to the main subject matter at hand. Greed. We are continuing on the series and looking at all 7 of the deadly sins. Why am I doing this randomly all of a sudden? I actually did not have this one planned out, but I think more recently than not, some things about greed have kind of come up, and I think that I want to just discuss it because it seems like an appropriate thing. I have yet to talk about it, and you know, it's one of the 7, so eventually I'll have these all in a playlist because I like the idea, and it's been a while since I've done one of these episodes, so I wanted to do one. It's been a little bit, but greed. Greed is one of those things. I will probably do the actual definition in the voiceover, but greed is a very interesting sin to me. Looking at them all again, greed is something that is a tough one. It's tough in the sense that in this world, basically, you kind of have to be a little greedy, unfortunately. But there are levels to it, obviously. But that's the main thing I want to discuss, really, is that there are levels to it. And I don't think certain people realize that there are levels to it. I think that most people will either be not greedy enough or too greedy. Obviously, you shouldn't be greedy at all, right? You shouldn't want to be hoarding as much as you can and doing all that stuff. I mean, you can see how that could cause issues in the real world. I mean, in 2020, there was huge problems because of people were greedy with certain things like, you know, toilet paper and shit like that. So that's just a surface level take on it. But realistically, greed is a tough thing because it's like you have to be slightly greedy in the world because you can't necessarily close your mouth and hope to God that everything goes well for you. You can, in theory, but you have a 50-50 shot of it actually working out for you. So it all just truly depends. And it is one of those things that I don't necessarily like the idea of it, but I understand why it happens. And I also understand when it gets too far. And I guess we'll go over the getting it too far in the voiceover. But for now, I'll say this, which is the other way, which is the not enough. There are some people out there that are not greedy enough with either their time, their effort, their spiritual will, their money, and other things like that, where they give and give and give. And giving is fine. It is something that people should do, honestly, depending on what you're doing. But giving is good. It's always going to be a good thing no matter what. But the thing is, some people will give too much to where they are overly compassionate or overly giving. There you go. To other people, and that can cause the downfall of a lot of people. It's not like it's something where it's like a death by 1,000 cuts, basically, where they start giving up too much of their time, their energy, their mental space, just a job or even money or whatever to people that will just continue to suck them dry until they are nothing but a husk or whatever is left, really. And some people don't realize that. That's kind of insane to me, but more so than not, it's just more in their nature to be more of a kind person and thus giving, but just a little too much. And I'm not going to say you should be greedy and hoard everything, because we'll get to that in the voiceover, but it's just to be aware of what's taking your time, really, and or money and or brain power, because once you give them your brain power, they can take it all and leave you with absolutely nothing. That was just part of some of what I think of when I think of greed in general. That and the WCW pay-per-view. But that's just something that I think of when I'm thinking of greed. Because greed is a very interesting, of all the sins, interesting. I feel like most people experience most of the sins for the most part, give or take, depending. Obviously, there are a couple that you may or may not get, just depending on certain proclivities slash preferences slash, there's another word I'm looking for, but I forget it right now. But greed is one where the way that society is structured and works, you're kind of rewarded for greed, which is not good, but that's a whole other discussion about the problems with society and all that other stuff, which we'll get to in some other time. But anyways, with that being said, I'll see you on the inside. Alright, so start this day off with single arm lat pull down. And to get back to the main subject here, Greed, which is intense and selfish desire for something, especially wealth, power, or food. Interesting how food isn't mentioned here. This is one of those sins that I'll say this, and that is that basically, once you get the taste of it, for certain things, people will start to develop such a greed for things, and it can lead to a downward spiral into having a greed for many things in life. It isn't just necessarily those three things like wealth, power, and food. It could be a multitude of things. Realistically, the most that we think of is wealth and power. Those are the two big ones that we think of. When reading this, I didn't even think of food, but food is something that people are greedy with. And you can see this with the amount of people that are big, that just straight up fat people. It's not that hard of a thing to see. I was once one of them because I used to be greedy with food all the time. I used to be I need to finish everything that I see on the plate. I cannot let anything go to waste type of people. And now it's very hard to get away from that. Once you've developed a certain level of greed, it's hard to go back on it. It's very interesting, and I think that that's really the downfall of a lot of people's greed, really, because once you get to a certain point in, let's say, the downward spiral of accumulating things like wealth and power and all these things, there is no real dialing it back. If you don't have a steady state where you're slowly but surely letting things climb up and getting to a spot where you want to be and not let it all but consume you. If you're not doing that, then if you just putting the pedal to the metal and trying to accumulate as much as humanly possible with disregard for everything that's around you and letting the real greed take over, people don't really come back from that. And that's the thing I think you got to remember about greed, really, is that it's one of those that once you continue and keep it going and like push the pedal to the metal for it, there is no coming back from it. It's very hard to have somebody who is greedy to not be greedy unless something crazy happens to them, and thus they have some type of intervention that life itself throws at them. Because really, they're not going to really learn the lesson until something crazy happens to them. And it's not even just these three things that I mentioned. In power is another one, because you get people who, for example, get greedy with, let's say, their significant other and such like that. So they end up cheating all the time. That's an example of that. And that alone, you can have people become very greedy with the fact that they have this partner to fall on and they can just do whatever they want. And it just can keep escalating worse and worse. Gambling is another one where they're going to be up, I don't know, like triple their money, and they're just going to keep assuming that they're going to keep going up and more and more. It's just going to be a never-ending scale. It exponentially grows nonstop as things progress. And that's why greed is a powerful thing. Once it starts, it's very hard to stop. I always try to remind myself personally not to let it get to me, to always be willing to share, to give to others, make sure that there is a level of, whoa, pump your brakes, be good to someone. Because if you keep hoarding or doing these things of let's say taking somebody's time or not being nice to others or just letting the stacking of money just consume you, or letting the food not go to waste so you just have to eat it all those things, you have to pump the brakes, because if not, you're not gonna let it be able to get out of that. You're gonna be stuck in a high gear and just keep going down this rabbit hole that can really, really ruin things later in life. You can see greed really take over somebody's life later on, where they don't know when to stop. They don't know what is the stopping point. There are people who are super rich that they don't know when to turn it off, and you see a lot of them end up grinding themselves out into nothingness or a shell of their former self, because they refuse to let the grind stop, because that's literally all they know. you have to be careful of people that take up your time, that are greedy with your time, or even your mental space, because these are the types of people that will take advantage of you because they know they can, and you have to be aware of that because they can come from any shape and or size. You just have to be aware of it, because if you're not aware of it, they can be greedy and let you just turn into nothingness. And so be aware of it as well from that aspect.
And now you've lost all but $600. You got greedy, Martin.
And we're back. Welcome to the workout debriefing. Exercise is not filmed. None. Exercise is skipped. Also none. Got everything in, thankfully. Going back home, a little tired, a little wired, but it is what it is. But anyways, back to the main subject matter at hand. Greed. I feel like most of the things in this series of sins, it's very interesting to not let it consume you. And I think that for greed, it can be very easy to let it consume you once you have the ability to greed. But also, greed isn't just a money thing, because that's something that I think a lot of people lose sight on, is that yes, of course, greed has to do with money, but also time. You could be wasting someone else's time without even realizing it, or the other way around, where you are giving somebody your time without even realizing it, without anything in return. They are being greedy with you as a person. And I feel like that is, I guess, not talked about as much, not nearly enough, especially in today's modern society where we live in the attention economy, where we want people to stick around and listen to what we have to say and watch so that we can get the AdSense and the dollar dues right after, or sell you something, you know? And I feel like a lot of people don't really think about that in the grand scheme of things. These corporations and social media platforms and generally jobs and all that other stuff are greedy with your time that they can take from you. Sure, jobs will pay you money, so that way it's a slight equivalent exchange, but realistically these jobs are also taking a toll on your soul as well. It's not like they can be all fulfilling and such. I mean, there are certain jobs that can be fulfilling, but a majority of them aren't. And if you can find something that is fulfilling, then it might have some other weird caveat. If it doesn't, then you're very, very lucky. But still, those are just some things that I think about when I think of this particular sin. And when looking at it from a grand scheme of things, maybe not the worst of them. I would probably say, depending on how you see it, it could be the least of them all, per se. But it also truly depends, because I think there's one that's a little lesser than this. But we'll get to that one when we get to that one, because I think that one will be coming up sooner or later. I think that'll be the next one. With that being said, though, it is probably on the tier list of ones to watch out. It's in there, but it's not necessarily up at the top. I wouldn't say I'd give it a ranking yet, but it's definitely not one that most people will misinterpret it and only interpret it in a fiscal direction and not really a spiritual direction and or a time sensitive direction, which is something to just think about. You never know. People may be greedy with other people's time and not even realize it. You know, you got to understand that, and that is part of somebody's soul. They can be greedy with the emotions that they give out, and somebody else sucks them up or something along those lines. You know, you got to be careful about that. But it is what it is. But with that being said, tell me what you think in the comments below. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions about this one. This one's a little bit of a out there one. It's a little bit different. I wanted to go a little bit old school. I wanted to go a little bit higher brain power for today. I didn't want to talk about a specific subject that was like just something that happened to happen. It was more of a thought process and a thought experiment. There you go. That's the correct term that I was trying to use. Thought I'd have a little bit of fun with it. But tell me what you think in the comments below. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions about this. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video with anybody who may or may not like it. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Please take care. I will see you in the next one. Keep it heavy. Stay warm out there and stay safe. I'll see you in the next one. Peace!